Dear students, I hope you are all well and enjoying your online classes. Last week we discussed about the asexual reproduction in plants and animals. Today we are going to discuss about the sexual reproduction in plants. Okay. So as you know, all flowering plants and some non-flowering plants show sexual reproduction. A flower is the reproductive organ of a plant. Okay. So, flower is the main reproductive organ of a plant since it bears the parts that produce the male and female gametes. In this chapter, we will deal only with flowering plants. Okay. So, first we read about the parts of a flower. A typical flower has four parts or holes. Okay, that are arranged in rings around each other. These are calyx, corolla, okay, calyx, corolla, endoecium and gynoecium. All floral holes are arranged on a flattened base called thalamus. The flower is borne on a stalk called the pedicel. So you can see, if you see the structure of a flower, okay, you can easily identify the different holes of a flower. Okay, the color ones, the brighter color one is petals, or is its single form is petal and combinedly is known as corolla. And the outer one, okay, the outer one is just outer one of it is known as calyx. Okay, first one which is usually green in color, which you saw in bud condition, okay, of flower, which protect the bud of that flower is known as calyx, and single form is sepal. This was okay. This structure is mainly sepal, and in combined form it is known as calyx. And the stalk of this flower is known as pedicel, and the flower is borne on that thalamus. Okay, so first we read about the calyx. This is the outermost green leaf-like hole of a flower. It is made up of units called sepals. The sepal protect the flower in the bud stage. Okay, so you can see in singular unit it is called sepal. Corolla, this is the second hole. It is made up of units called petals, which are often large and colorful. They may also be scented and produce nectar. Next floral part is androecium. This is the male reproductive hole of the flower. It is made up of units called stamens. Each stamen has two parts, an anther and a filament. The anther bears pollen grains containing the male gametes. Gynoecium. This is the female reproductive hole of a flower. It is made up of units called carpel or pistils. Each carpel consists of three parts: stigma, style, and ovary. Okay, so go in the figure and you can easily see this structure. Okay, this is the stamen. Okay, and anther just above that, and it is called filament. Okay, it has two parts. Stamen has two parts, anther and filament, and it is carpel. Okay, it is full carpel and it is divided into three parts: stigma, style, and ovary. So stigma is the sticky structure at the top of the carpel to receive pollen grains. Style is a tube like stalk of the carpel. Ovary is the swollen base of the carpel that contains ovules. The egg or female gamete is formed in the ovule. Okay, this is the structure of ovule. So this ovary contain this ovule inside it. So flowers that bear both the stamen and the pistil are called bisexual flowers. Okay, flower that bear either the stamen or the pistil are called unisexual flower. Next is pollination. For reproduction to take place, the male and female gametes in the anther and the ovary respectively must come together. This is achieved by pollination. When the anthers mature, they split open and the pollen grains are set free. The pollen grains either fall on the stigma of the same flower or are transferred by various agents to the stigma of another flower belonging to the same species. The transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma by the various agents called pollination. So this is the definition of pollination. Okay, so pollination is also of two types. First is self pollination. As the name suggests, the transfer of pollen grains from the anther of a flower to the stigma of the same flower or another flower born on the same plant is called self pollination. It means when the pollination takes place within the plant. Okay, next, cross pollination, the transfer of pollen grains from the anthers of one flower to the stigma of another flower, means on a different plant, okay, of the same species is called cross pollination. So if you see the figure, you can easily understand that this is the example of self pollination. It is a single plant or flower in which self pollination take place. So this is the example. Next is the example of cross pollination, in which the anther is transferred to the stigma of another flower, but the species is same. So this is cross pollination. One other method of pollination is artificial pollination. This is the oldest method used for growing plants or crops with desired characteristics. In this method, seeds of selected plant are used to produce plants of next generation. Artificial pollination is induced by brushing the pollen of the desired plant onto the stigma of another plant in order to produce an offspring with the desired characteristics of the parent traits. So there are different agents to facilitate the process of cross pollination, which you read in the next class. Okay, so fertilization. Now we move to the fertilization. The process by which a male gamete fuses with the female gamete producing a zygote is called fertilization. The zygote develops into a new individual. Fertilization occurs after pollination. Figure 2.13 gives a step-by-step account of fertilization and the post-fertilization changes in plants. Okay, so by this graphical representation, you can understand the pollen tube emerges from the pollen grain. It grows down the style to reach the ovule present in the ovary. Okay, on reaching the ovule, the tip of the pollen tube bursts to release male gamete inside the ovule. Male gamete fertilizes with the female gamete, producing zygote. The fertilized egg divides to form an embryo. The ovule changes into a seed and the ovary changes into a fruit. Okay, all the other parts of the flower, sepal, petals, and style wither and fall off. Over time, the fruit ripens and releases the seed. The seeds are dispersed by wind, water, or animals to different places. On finding optimum conditions, each seed germinates and grow into a new plant. So this is the process of fertilization and post-fertilization changes in plants. So I hope you understand this concept, and there are some questions for you, okay, which you have to done. The reproductive organ of a plant, you already know, flower. The outermost green leaf hole of a flower is called calyx. The transfer of pollen grains from the anther of a flower to the stigma of the same flower or another flower born on the same plant is called self-pollination. Flower that bear both the stamen and the pistil is known as bisexual flower. The transfer of pollen grains from the anthers of one flower to the stigma of another flower on a different plant of the same species is called cross pollination. So these are very easy questions. Okay, so I hope you will be understand the process of pollination and about the structure of the flower. Okay, if you have any confusion, you can ask to me. So for understanding the fertilization process, I just show you that how pollen tube is formed here. If suppose a pollen grain is fall here and it releases a pollen tube like that, and it just fuses with this ovule. Okay, and it release its gametes, male gamete. Okay, and they forms their embryo. Okay, in detail, you will be read about this process in the next class. Thank you.